So it's a pleasure to be here. I just want to make one introductory comment before we begin. I will share examples of cases and other stuff, but everything I share, these are my own views. They don't represent official views of any organization. So what I want to do is kind of change the conversation a bit. So I could have easily presented on work we were doing a while back, even before Cambridge Analytica broke. So this was a team, we were looking at conversations that were happening on Facebook, all kinds of stuff. If you have any interest on this, just go online. We were examining the kinds of conversations, kinds of active supporters, active dissenters, who was inciting what kind of actions offline, so on and so forth. So I could have talked about that, but I'm not going to. And the reason being, I think the problem of responsible AI has to do a lot with government. And as the co-domain lead, so I thought, given that Gentry was going to be talking about ethics and all of that, I would examine it from the other end, which is, how is AI being used in the public environment, and then present to you a maturity model to advance public agencies' use of AI. And so the maturity model that I'm going to present is work that involved examining public agencies in about 20 different countries around the world. And so that's going to be the focus of my remarks. So when we think about AI and government agencies or public agencies, they normally appear in three places. One is in service delivery. The other one is in the creation or the evaluation of public policy. And the third is in the design of governance mechanisms. So what I want to share with you is the more positive stuff. So here's an example. Here's a chatbot that's being used in Dubai, where it actually has performed much better than human employees. It answers queries better, people are happier, response times are higher. This is a very basic use case. But if we look at, oops, what's happening to this? Yeah. If we look at countries like Estonia, right, that have built their entire digital governance processes, platforms, and systems, it offers us a glimpse of how we might go about thinking about the responsible use of data. Estonia has been on this data transformation journey since '95. And they have been deliberately thinking about the public use of data. They have models in place where individuals have to input their data only one time. The public has high trust in the government use of data. They use data in innovative ways, right? So while we hear a lot about the bad side, I also want to bring up, there's a lot of good side that's happening with government and data. Estonia is just one example. But they have been on this journey for a long time. They have had a long view of the problem and the opportunity, okay? The other place that you see AI often is in public policy. So that actually was my old office before I came here. That was one of my offices where we would model different kinds of problems. We would bring in decision makers and try to move them from making decisions on instinct or gut to saying, here's the evidence, interact along with the actual data. And we did this for a range of problems. Not all of them involved AI, but they were all computational models. They were all computational models. A lot of them was simulation based, and we would get individuals to engage with data, most of them being from the public sector, and we would force them to interact with data rather than interact with reports that summarized your data, right? And so these are places where I think the government systems domain can have another angle, where it's not just all about how do we analyze data, but how do we have responsible conversations around data? That's a big piece when you are trying to create public policy, okay? And then we have examples that are like this, and this is from France, where they have begun to think about what does responsible data look like across an ecosystem, right? So there are plenty of examples around of good things happening where we can draw out key principles, key approaches, and try to see if they scale or if they'll work in other environments. So when we think about AI governance, here is the Alibaba brain, the study brain, which is a model where they are ingesting massive amount of data using AI and a whole range of other computational tools to help reduce things like traffic congestion, so on and so forth. On the flip side, they have access to all that data, right? And so we are seeing a lot of new approaches to how we govern our communities, govern our urban areas that have AI inbuilt in them. But then you also see AI and versions of it like this when you think about governance, right? This is also happening. This is also happening, right? And this is an old article. So AI is everywhere in the public sector. So what I'm interested in is how do we equip our public agencies to improve their competency and improve their capabilities when it comes to AI? Because ultimately, as I think it was Rachel's response to a question, we are going to need some aspect of regulation, some aspects of policy to play a role as we address these challenges. And if our public agencies do not have the capacity nor the capability, well, they are always going to be behind the curve. And then it's a losing proposition, okay? So very quickly, so a research team of mine, we have been examining how government agencies use AI since 2018. And so we did a report in 2018 where we said, here is how the different agencies are using it. And we propose a basic framework on how they could improve their maturity. A number of those agencies have used our maturity framework. And then in 2021, we again evaluated where they were and came up with a revised framework. Okay. So at the most basic level, it's called the rookie. This is ad hoc. This is where government agencies are just playing around. There's some work happening, some things are happening. And as you can see, there's an absence of governance and ethical frameworks. They're just playing around, they're just figuring it out, right? And there are a lot of agencies across the globe that are at this level. There are a lot. For obvious reasons, in the report, we didn't name them explicitly, right? But this is, and for every level, we ended up breaking things down into two large domains. One is the technical, the other is the organizational. And in each, there are three components. Of interest to all of you is this one right here, the middle one, right? That's what ad hoc looks like. There's nothing there. Small data sets, quality of data sets is questionable. Individuals are just playing around. Okay. That's called the rookie. The next one up is the learner. This is where they're actually wanting to experiment. This is where they're actually wanting to move from this ad hoc way of playing around, right? Oh, for those of you that are trying to snap images, I'll have a link at the end where the whole report can be downloaded. So beautiful. So, and it's all open source, free, whatever. So don't worry about trying to squeeze your eyes or whatever. So the experiment is where we are beginning to see them move, try some stuff. Okay, and as you can see over here, they're beginning to recognize the importance of ethical and governance. And to us, this is where we have to intervene. This is where we have to get things right at this experimentation phase, because this is where things you have a chance to have conversations about data, about algorithms, and have those conversations with a long view. Once you go above this phase, and I'll show you the next one, in our opinion, it's way too late. You have already let things out. But at the experimentation stage, you have the capacity and the capability to influence ethics and responsible AI, if that's your goal. And for every one of these levels, so I've just given you one example here. We have a number of case studies. So this is Transport Canada and what they were doing and how they began to learn from one model and then move to the next and so on. Okay. So I make sure, yep, I'm doing good. So here's what the learner looks like, right? And as you can see, this last point down here, most often derived from projects, but they are not thinking across domains. So they are viewing ethics or governance inside projects. But this is why you need to have an agency-wide conversation at this level to intervene. Okay. Next one is the planner. That's one level up. This is what the description seems, right? And I'll just click through because I know I have limited time. But here, you begin to see accountability. You begin to start seeing actual documents about what does these frameworks mean, but if you haven't had that conversation in the previous stage, most of these are project specific, which is really, really unfortunate because in our opinion, you have to have an agency-wide conversation, not just project by project, and then try to have an overall framework, okay? But again, you now begin to see formal governance in place, accountability, but as we note over here, it is also uneven. There will be projects that have strong accountability, but those where things need improvement. Okay, scaling and learning is when these systems are being ready to be moved outside the agency, moved to citizens, so on and so forth. And so at this point, agencies have live AI projects that are being used at scale, which means if they are responsible for housing, the AI tool is being used for all of their housing related transactions of a certain kind. Okay. So here, I just give the example of the BLS in the US, where again, this was just very basic RPA, robotic process automation, where again, and at the evolver level, you will see that they are also transitioning their workforce that used to do the manual task into higher or order work. Okay, and the last phase is when you have agency-wide. This is the hardest to do. And to the best of our research, we couldn't find one. And so this is more of a, if you were to do the others, what does an end state look like that you are continuing to optimize? Okay. And here again, we have identified what does your AI practices look like. There's formal accountability, there's training on governance, ethical frameworks are present, and there's formal policy frameworks to guide how do you conceptualize, how do you design, and how do you develop and deploy AI-related technologies. Okay. 2 more minutes. So, as I said, there's a link. The whole report's available. And the report has a number of case studies in it. In addition, what I want to do is also point out there's a number of projects that we are involved in. Where is she? Disappeared. Samar disappeared. Okay. But she was here. So she's leading up a whole project on how do national level AI strategy plans, how do they incorporate ethics, how are people trained around it, what are the computational capacities. So if you want more on anything on AI at the public level, there's a link. We try to release about one of these every 6 weeks or so. So because we have an ongoing project, so rather than waiting for the research articles to appear, through my work with Brookings, we try to release at least one every 6 weeks. Our most recent one was examining, do countries have the requisite human capital to actually realize their AI ambitions? Okay, so with that, I'll end, take questions, and anything else you want. Thank you.